After 5 years and 2 kids, my boyfriend confessed he cheated on me with multiple men while I was pregnant with our first child. I was disassociated, he claims. How do I rebuild trust when the man I loved who proposed to me has shattered my reality? This is excessively lengthy, but I need to start from the beginning. I female ended a toxic on-and-off relationship with my ex-female that lasted for 5 years. We began dating when we were freshmen in high school and officially separated 1 year after graduation. I cheated on her a few times and she cheated on me a few times. It was simply unhealthy and toxic all around. So when we broke up, I felt completely lost. I was extremely codependent on her. I had sacrificed all my friends to be with her. All except one who was a mutual friend between the two of us. Honestly, he was more her friend, but I think he had a crush on me and his relationship with her was deteriorating. I asked him if he could continue to be my friend and he flatly told me no because he liked me deeply and genuinely could not be my friend. This is a brief summary of his explanation. I was impressed. I had never encountered someone so open and honest before. I always felt he was straightforward and sincere, displaying maturity and sensitivity which were a complete contrast to my ex. I did not want him to abandon me and I was attracted to him, so I suggested we talk and see where it would lead, but that we should take it slow. I was just out of a relationship after all. However, it honestly progressed rather quickly. We became intimate after dating for a month, then moved in together in our third month of dating because the pandemic had just begun and lockdown was occurring. We were living with our parents and did not want to stay there, so we decided to move in together. We encountered financial troubles, so I found a job. His mother did not like me initially, but he defended me and made her understand that I was a priority for him and that he would not tolerate her bullying me. Eventually, she worked on her relationship with me and we became family. I began to struggle significantly with depression. I don't know, I was just overwhelmed with regrets about not attending college and spending so much of my life on my ex. My self-esteem was terrible and I suffered from body dysmorphia. Looking back, I should have taken time to work on myself before committing to someone else. Nevertheless, I was trying. It wasn't all bad days every day. This was our first year together, which was turbulent. Then I discovered I was pregnant. I was terrified. My immediate thought was that he would leave me and I felt like my life was over. I have always been pro-choice, but when I was in that hospital room and they told me I needed to decide soon, I thought about my little brother whom I watched die. I could not live with myself if I willingly gave my baby to God because of my past trauma. My mother was with me at the hospital when I found out, and we discussed how I did not want to terminate the pregnancy, but if I could not raise my baby, I would give it to someone who could and wanted to. After that, I talked with my boyfriend. He immediately stated he would not dictate what I should do with my body and that he would support me no matter what. He admitted he did not know if he was ready to be a father, but if I had this baby, he would step up and be a father, especially since he grew up without one. He instilled confidence in me that he would be in this with me. I had told him I loved him before, and while I did love him, my feelings deepened after this revelation. Call it hormones or whatever you wish, but it did. I experienced terrible morning sickness and I was constantly hungry and tired. I had to quit my job and he provided me with complete financial support. After finding out I was 4 weeks pregnant, I struggled with depression over the next 2 months but eventually began to recover once it settled in that my life was changing and it felt like it might be for the better. My attitude started to significantly improve. I felt more emotionally in tune with myself and more empathetic toward others. Communication with my boyfriend became easier and I was more mindful of how this impacted him. I did not push him on anything and ensured that during disagreements I was mature and respectful even if he was not. I was falling deeply in love with him, however I was ignoring red flags. Though we both smoked weed, I stopped when I learned I was pregnant and did not think it would be fair to ask him to quit just because I had to. He began smoking heavily and then started drinking frequently, gradually going from occasional drinking to finishing a full bottle of tequila every other night. At times, I felt like he was escaping me, but I told myself he was just doing his own thing and I would ignore it. He only drank at night while his smoking was constant throughout the day. I did not see it as much different from my own past, so I did not feel I had the right to say anything or judge him. After the baby was born, it did begin to bother me a bit. I did not feel confident in him as my support, therefore my mother stayed with us. He hated it, but I was scared to be alone and had so many new responsibilities, taking care of an infant, my boyfriend, and finding time to care for myself. She stayed with us for about 3 weeks before I felt comfortable enough to say she could go and that I could manage on my own. It was difficult to ask my boyfriend for help, but when I did, he was supportive and considerate. Sometimes I felt like a burden because he could be very temperamental with me, and I believe that is why I would neglect my own needs while trying to care for my baby completely. However, I loved my baby so much and loved him even more for giving her to me. He proposed to me 2 weeks after I had my daughter, and I naturally accepted. I knew I did not want to plan a wedding anytime soon, as the baby was still very young and our finances were even tighter with a child in the picture. Our relationship felt solid to me. I knew he was the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, the man I wished to create a home and family with. By the time my daughter was 8 months old, I knew I wanted another baby. I asked my boyfriend and he agreed to begin trying. I recognized that he thought I was crazy, but he adored our daughter and seemed impressed with how well I adapted to being a mother frankly. So was I. However, we did have moments when I struggled to be a girlfriend. Being a mother consumed me. I was entirely focused on my daughter. 1 month after my daughter's first birthday, we discovered we were expecting another baby. I felt very happy. I was raised with a younger sibling who was 2 years younger than me, and I wanted my children to have that experience. The second pregnancy was rough on my body, and I felt a lot more stressed since I was also raising and breastfeeding a toddler. During my pregnancy, my boyfriend faced his own medical problems. He had to completely stop drinking and focus on his health. He successfully quit drinking, which was a process, and he ended up needing surgery 2 weeks after our second baby was born. We have grown significantly together, navigating our ups and downs, primarily struggling with communication. Not once have I doubted his loyalty to me, and I have always felt he was honest to the point of making me feel lacking. Here was this remarkable man who continually worked hard for me and our children, and was so open and truthful with me. I felt immense pride and admiration for him, yet I struggled to express it. My insecurity regarding my identity had a strong hold over me. I perceived him as too good for me and would often compare myself to him, feeling unworthy. I knew I was a good mother, and that was all I believed I had to offer. Therefore, during moments when I genuinely needed to resolve issues with him, I would freeze and shut down, terrified that if I were to open up at that moment, he would not want me. I realize now that it was irrational, but insecurities can do that. We attempted to get married before our son was born, but something always held me back. I simply lacked the confidence that he genuinely wanted me for who I am. I felt that to him, marriage was just a mere formality following the birth of our children and our love, as if it were something simply to check off a list. Given how I was raised, I have always regarded marriage as a serious commitment, and divorce is frowned upon. Now let's fast forward. We are still not married. We have a 3-year-old daughter and a 19-month-old son. I am 25 and my boyfriend is 27. We lost our home and moved in with my mother. It is tough, but it's a last resort until we can buy our own home. My boyfriend confessed that he wanted to start going to church and know God. I was raised Christian, so I have no issue with this. I have lost my way with Christ myself, but I am not against seeking my way back. We have turned our hearts toward Christ and committed to growing in faith together. I conveyed to him that I was ready to marry him and wanted God to be part of our relationship. He agreed, and I felt even closer to him. One night while we were enjoying a casual date together, he mentioned he had 2 things to tell me. Given his reserved demeanor and the nervous tone in his voice, I immediately sensed something was wrong. My chest tightened and my stomach churned. My first thought was that he had cheated on me, followed by the realization that I was being foolish. He would never do that. He proceeded to tell me that before we started dating, he thought he might be interested in men and had experimented with them. I, who had never known he harbored such feelings, was shocked. He then explained that he felt he could not confide in me about his inclinations. He said that when we first started dating, our relationship was so rocky that he thought we would break up. During that time, he had these urges, downloaded an app, and met up with a transgender individual engaging in sexual activities. He liked it and repeated the act 2 more times. When he was not meeting with them, he was messaging other men with explicit content and entertaining other men while committed to me. I asked him when it all began. He met with the first guy shortly after we learned I was pregnant with our first child, and the infidelity continued over the subsequent year. However, he insisted that it was merely sex and claimed he had dissociated from the actions. He felt so overwhelmed by guilt afterward that he began drinking to cope. He could not provide me with a definitive timeline of when it ended, because he said he had completely dissociated himself from those experiences. He insisted he finally got his desires under control and was able to stop, attributing his shame and fears to his childhood trauma. He explained that he never found the right time to tell me, but he realized he could not marry me without me knowing the whole truth. He professed his love for me and reiterated that he wanted me but acknowledged he had messed up, which is utterly devastating for me. I love this man, but he has shattered my trust and completely violated me. He has manipulated me and gaslighted me. I am uncertain about what to do or how to feel. He assures me that it happened 3 years ago. He identifies as gay, bisexual, or bisexual curious. I love this man, but is he truly the person I love? I never envisioned him capable of such actions. I never doubted his loyalty to me. I struggle to comprehend how a person could claim to love someone, have a child with them, and propose all while being unfaithful. The complete disregard and lack of respect he has displayed towards me are confounding. Furthermore, why do I not want to leave him? Why? I do not know how to stay and be genuinely happy again. I sometimes wish I could forget. I discovered everything 3 weeks ago. During the first week, we discussed it extensively, which helped, but the feelings are still raw. It is easier to suppress my emotions when he is around. We still live together, he just sleeps in a separate room. Since I found out, I have been intimate with him multiple times, It confuses him that I desire intimacy so soon, but I need to feel wanted. I crave that sensation, even though I understand that physical intimacy does not sustain a relationship. He has expressed interest in being pegged. I'm not against that, but it is challenging to reconcile that he essentially said, "Forget this woman, she cannot provide what I want, so I will seek out a man to fulfill my desires." Perhaps it is not just about the physical sensation. Maybe he genuinely wanted a man, but I feel offended. My self-esteem has taken a hit and my perception of him is now distorted. I see him as weak and insecure, especially when I think about how he hurt me. Previously, I never viewed him in that light. Even when he had insecurities about his body image, I held love and pride for him for showing me and sharing his body with me, regardless of those insecurities. I just want the anger and pain to cease. I do not know how to process this. I love him, but I do not know how to forgive him. Story 2. Cutting ties with my mother, 67F, and brother, 50M, seems inevitable after they threatened my custody rights and dismissed my concerns over a dog bite incident involving my son, 3M. My mom claims I'm manipulating grandma over her house sale, but it's my son's safety that's at stake. Is family loyalty worth this chaos? For context, my divorce was finalized last week. My brother seemed to struggle with it much more than I did for some reason, and he was very hostile toward both me and my ex-wife. This hostility was so intense that both of us have blocked him on all communication platforms as well as his wife. We used to be fairly close, and he would help watch my son, 3 years old, but I am unsure of what has changed in him recently. He lashed out at me and my ex-wife shortly after one day of babysitting, threatened me, kicked me out of his house, called my ex-wife to yell at her while questioning her parenting, and was also upset that our mother was babysitting for him, expressing that she couldn't be trusted. This point will be relevant shortly. Once again, he has remained blocked since that incident, as my ex-wife and I still maintain a close relationship and are in frequent contact. Since my divorce proceedings began, I have been living with my grandmother, 90 years old, and things have been going well. Since I am paying my attorney's fees out of pocket, she has not charged me rent. Moreover, since it has been over a year at this point, my son has become quite comfortable there, leading us to discuss the idea of me purchasing her house, as we both feel at home in it. Everything seemed fine, but she is a stubborn woman and did not want to engage in any official paperwork, believing that once my divorce was finalized, I would just buy the house and insisting that she would not take advantage of me. The agreement was that the price would be the market value of the house minus any real estate agent fees, as they would not be involved in a private sale. This situation incited anger in my brother, who became convinced that I was trying to take advantage of our grandmother. I attempted to explain to him that if I were a master manipulator, I would not have initiated the conversation at market value, but he refused to listen. He then spoke to my mother, who has also developed the same misguided belief. Unfortunately, the worst-case scenario occurred a few weeks ago when my grandmother had a stroke. Fortunately, it was not serious. She returned home after a couple of days, but she has not been completely herself since, which is to be expected. Naturally, the entire family has been focused on her recovery. My uncle is aware of the house sale and is indifferent about it. I have not discussed it with my aunt, so I am unsure of her views. Since the stroke, family members have been coming over to watch my grandmother, as I regrettably do not have the flexibility of a work-from-home job. For the most part, everything has been going fine. However, complicating matters, my mother has been staying with us intermittently, always bringing her aggressive and troublesome dog. A few weeks ago, my son attempted to hug her goodbye during an exchange with my ex-wife, and the dog reacted defensively, trying to bite him in the face. Naturally, I had to address the issue. Since then, my mother has accused both me and my ex-wife of lying, claiming that the incident never occurred. My uncle reached out to me, expressing sympathy, as he also dislikes the dog and does not want his grandchildren around it either. The dog is a 20-pound schnauzer, which is large enough to inflict serious harm on a toddler. As my brother has been blocked, he contacted our father to complain. My dad was shocked to hear about the nearly dog bite incident and was astonished that my mother was not taking it seriously. For additional context, when I was 6 years old, a dog bit me in the face, requiring over 60 stitches, and I nearly lost my left eye. It is important to note that I love animals and have not been permanently traumatized by this event. As the family began discussions on how to care for my grandmother, I volunteered to take the lead. I am a former firefighter, nurse, and paramedic, and I am well qualified to handle health-related issues as needed. Additionally, having lived with my grandmother for a year, I am well aware of her wishes, even though she has not documented them. For now, the family desires someone to live in the house full-time to keep an eye on my grandmother. I informed my mother that since she has refused to address the dog bite issue, she would no longer be responsible for babysitting. In response, she is trying to persuade my grandmother to evict me, believing I am being a bully. To further complicate matters, my grandmother blacked out and fell yesterday. I was in another room, as was my mother, so neither of us witnessed the fall, but we both heard and felt the impact as she fell hard. I immediately called 911 and began assessing the situation while providing dispatch with the necessary information, all while my mother sat on the floor crying. I was prepared to accompany my grandmother in the ambulance to the hospital since I knew she was a trauma alert given the circumstances, her medical history, and her medications. My mother declined as she has now assumed the role of power of attorney. The medics preferred that she not accompany them, stating they had to do a lot of things and did not want her in the back with them. Keep in mind, my grandmother was bleeding from a head laceration and was unresponsive. I drove my mother to the emergency room, and by the time we were finally permitted to enter, my grandmother immediately asked if my dog was okay, expressing concern that she had fallen on my little dog, who is a 6-pound Maltese Yorkie and is 17 years old. My mother could not handle being present and felt nauseous at the thought of my grandmother receiving stitches, so I drove her back home and returned to the emergency room. Upon entering, my grandmother asked if my mother was treating me well. I responded affirmatively because our focus was on her health. My grandmother did not grasp the animosity coming from my mother, so I explained the near dog bite incident and the threats of eviction. My grandmother was unaware of any of this, as I had not mentioned it to her to avoid causing her stress. She told me that she did not want my mother around because my mother is chaotic and causes stress. I informed my grandmother that this was not the right time for such a conversation. To her credit, she was completely coherent and, in fact, is already back home and in bed as if nothing occurred after receiving 5 stitches to her forehead. My ex-wife decided to check in on my mother to see how she was doing, and my mother expressed her desire to be done with the entire situation and to return home. I have a feeling that this is code for wanting to place my grandmother in a nursing home. The verbal agreement between my grandmother and me was that after I purchased the house, she would always have a home there, and I would cover any necessary hospital bed and home health care costs. Thus far, the family has entirely ignored that arrangement. Honestly, I suspect that part of the problem is that my grandmother would have a nice nest egg to fund home health care, leading me to wonder if this is an inheritance-related issue. My mother told my ex-wife that once the house is put on the market, I can make an offer. My ex-wife is also supporting me in significantly reducing babysitting time due to what my mother appears to be turning into through this ordeal. It seems my brother has also expressed his frustrations to our dad about how our mother should not be power of attorney because she is not reliable. I am unaware if he has attempted to contact me since I have him blocked. I am contemplating lifting the block for a week so we can have a conversation, but I will establish strict boundaries. The crux of the issue is that I am genuinely a person who refuses to accept toxicity in my life. I did not speak to my father for many years due to his negative comments about my wife. It turns out he was right, so I apologized and reinstated contact, and our relationship is currently very positive. He is advising me not to burn all my bridges right now. I informed my mother that if I have to sign a mortgage for a brand new home and displace my son and me yet again during this divorce, I will never forgive her for her lack of support, and our relationship will be over. I have friends who are trying to help with babysitting because my ex-wife has been taking on more babysitting duties. However, her job has made it difficult for her to cover everything entirely. My divorce attorney also specializes in probate and estate law and is already well versed in this situation. I honestly think I will need to take legal action against my mother concerning my grandmother's well-being. My dad felt this was excessive, but I told him that after what my grandmother said to me in the emergency room, I cannot, in good conscience, ignore that information. I was present from the beginning to the end of her hospital stay, so I am confident she was fully cognitively aware. Although I cannot provide proof of her cognitive state, I know it to be true. My dad is supporting my decision. I am uncertain if I am prepared for this. I feel as if my social life was disrupted by the divorce, but I have navigated that loneliness and rebuilt a strong social circle. I am unsure I have the energy to fight my family for my home and for the care of my grandmother because if I must move and purchase a new home, then my agreement with her must be abandoned, as her ability to afford home health care relies on the financial stability from the house transfer. However, my grandmother has been a constant presence in my life for 40 years and has supported me despite all of my mistakes. My mother and brother appear to dwell on my past and use stories from my 20s against me. I am awaiting a call, hopefully tomorrow, from my attorney to discuss my next steps. No solution seems simple. Even if I move out and acquire my own place, I could avoid the drama, but that feels like abandoning my grandmother. If I do not gain power of attorney, I worry that home health care will not be available for her, and she has expressly stated that she does not want to enter a nursing home. I work full-time, am fulfilling the responsibilities of a single dad, and am currently working toward completing my master's degree. I understand that I cannot take full-time responsibility for her well-being, but no one seems to be considering my proposed solution. Where do I go from here? Story 3. My best friend outshines me at every turn, leaving me filled with resentment. Why am I barely scraping BS while he's racking up As? Now I'm caught in a whirlwind of jealousy and guilt, worrying I might ruin our friendship. Can I overcome this? This is my first post, and I have been contemplating writing about this for a long time. I feel as though I have finally reached my breaking point regarding all this, so here you go. I apologize for the length, but I wanted to explain everything in detail. I will refrain from using any names or locations because I am too paranoid that he will find this. I met my friend at university during our first year and we hit it off quite well. We were enrolled in the same course, attended the same classes, and even lived in the same student accommodation. During our first year, everything was relatively fine. I received decent grades and even earned an A on one of my major assignments. However, towards the end of the year, I became quite distracted due to personal issues, which prevented me from noticing what grades he was achieving. Our lives became more separate during this time. In our second year, we moved in together, just the two of us, and we attended classes together, sat through lectures together, and then returned home together. Initially, I enjoyed this since it felt like one of the closest friendships I had experienced, and I thought we were truly similar. However, this perspective changed when we began working on assignments. It is an honors program, so the grades now significantly impact our degrees. I started to progress on my assignments by doing extensive pre-reading, gathering sources for my essays, and developing what I believed were strong arguments in advance. Most of our assessments are essays rather than exams. Meanwhile, my friend tended to leave his work until the last minute, often completing it just 2 to 3 days before the deadlines. Therefore, I expected to receive better grades. However, when the first round of grades was released, I received an average B grade while he achieved an A, a solid A, not just barely passing. This was frustrating for me because I had put in significantly more effort on these assignments than I ever had before, whereas my friend completed his work in a couple of days and performed exceptionally well. I attempted to incorporate the feedback I received on my essays into my next assignments, but when I received my grades back, I scored the same mark yet again. Meanwhile, my friend submitted his assignments in a short time frame and received an even higher A at this point. I was incredibly troubled because he was on track for a first-class degree, while I was heading toward an average 2.1. I understand that this result is acceptable and will not negatively affect the career I wish to pursue, but I had expectations for myself that I felt were not being met. I sensed that spending almost all my time with him was contributing to my frustrations, but I had no other friends, and he might feel as though he had done something wrong if I began spending time alone. This situation persisted throughout our entire second year. I did not receive a single A despite applying the advice I was given regarding my assignments, while my friend managed to secure an A on every task, claiming that his success was merely the result of luck. As we entered our third year, I was excited about our first assignment in one of our classes, as we had the option to submit a creative piece instead of a critical one if we preferred. I had been engaged in creative writing during my free time since the beginning of high school, and in our English classes where creative writing was required, I always performed well, usually receiving a grades. Therefore, I opted for the creative assignment. For some reason, my friend chose to do the same, even though he complained throughout the process, stating that he was not a creative writer and would not perform well. I anticipated excelling at this assignment due to my background, but when we received our marks, I scraped by with a mid-level B while my friend earned one of the highest grades available at the undergraduate level. I struggled to conceal my anger and did not voice any unkind remarks, but this incident marked a turning point where my frustration began to intensify. Here I was, engaged in an activity I both enjoyed and believed I was skilled at or thought I was, and he produced work superior to mine within just 3 days after I had been writing for years. The anger still lingers in my mind, which only exacerbates my feelings, as I know it's not his fault for being naturally talented at things on his first attempt, and I realize that I should not harbor bitterness toward him. Adding to my emotional burden, a few months ago, I started working at a location related to the career I thought I wanted to pursue. It was not overly difficult to secure a position there, but it is one of the few opportunities available in my vicinity that offers valuable experience. My friend, who also aspires to enter the same field as I do, another similarity that brought us together, managed to obtain a position at the same place as me. My supervisor had informed me that I would be the last person hired for the next 6 months, so I was surprised. Because of the resentment I have been feeling, I was frustrated at the prospect of being around him more, especially since we would be arriving at work at the same times on the same days. However, that was manageable until I received an email from my supervisor a few weeks after my friend started, stating that they had reassigned me from the tasks I had been performing to less relevant duties that I could learn elsewhere, believing I would be better suited for them, while my friend would take on my previous responsibilities. Although the message was phrased politely and did not explicitly label me as incompetent while implying my friend was smarter, that was the underlying message. I was infuriated and still am, especially since it was apparent on his first day that my new coworkers liked him more than me after just 1 hour, compared to their familiarity with me over 3 months. I tend to be rather quiet and shy, while he is more approachable and less awkward in conversation. I acknowledge that none of this is his fault, but experiencing this amid all my other frustrations has made me feel like I am losing my mind. I am genuinely contemplating exploring different career paths because I believe competing for accredited experiences and internships, while also trying to gain acceptance into a postgraduate program, is a daunting prospect given my situation. I feel as though my previous experiences indicate he is bound to receive the best opportunities, while I will have to settle for whatever is left over, regardless of how hard I strive. Additionally, another source of my frustration, which is partially attributable to him, is the extremely negative perception he maintains of himself. Calling it a victim mindset does not quite capture it, but I cannot find the appropriate term. He often believes that everyone detests him and that he is socially incompetent, a struggle I genuinely relate to, which is why we bonded over this matter. Yet that was before I joined him in social situations. He can easily engage and joke with almost anyone, while my awkwardness comes across as simply odd and unlikable. Although he insists he has no friends, he occasionally shares anecdotes about others within the societies of which he is a part, detailing conversations and lunch plans with various individuals, clearly not friendless, whereas he is genuinely the only person from university I consider a friend. The other phone numbers I possess are from acquaintances made during our first-year accommodation. The most infuriating aspect is his continual complaints about obtaining as, while he expresses disbelief about how poorly he is doing, ultimately receiving top marks every time he does. Furthermore, when he receives an A that is lower than his usual scores, he laments to me how terrible it is, while I am just managing to attain BS. It seems that his behavior stems from a desire to connect with others. A casual, "Oh yes, I am terrible at this, haha," but it is increasingly grating on my nerves. I am unsure how to address this without coming across as a generally miserable person, while suggesting that he must alter his demeanor and humor because I can no longer endure it. I'm also somewhat puzzled by the depth of my emotional turmoil regarding the situation. Despite the job and various other stressors being new, the main issue lies in our differing grades. I have never been the top student achieving straight A's. While I typically performed well, my high school experience was one where I was content receiving mostly BS, with an occasional A. Thus, I do not comprehend why witnessing someone I genuinely like outperforming me provokes such anger within me. I feel as though my frustration over grades has translated into annoyance with every little aspect of his personality, making previously insignificant remarks and actions increasingly irritating. It has become challenging to desire his company, especially as he now seems to explain or comment on things that I perceive as personal attacks, condescendingly implying that I am lacking in intellect, even though logically I know that is not his intention and I am likely projecting my insecurities. I am acutely aware that much of this originates from my own issues of self-worth and insecurities. However, merely acknowledging this reality does not alter my feelings. I have attempted various techniques to manage jealousy, reminding myself of my own strengths and abilities, but to no avail. I go from feeling overwhelmingly angry, jealous, bitter, and resentful to feeling terrible and guilty, especially since my friend is genuinely a good person who does not flaunt his success. Furthermore, I truly believe we could maintain a long-lasting friendship if I succeed in overcoming this hurdle. While this post is primarily for venting purposes, I would greatly appreciate any advice from those who have experienced something similar and have suggestions for coping. I find myself at a loss for how to navigate the situation, and while it has not occurred yet, I fear that I may lash out or say something regretful that could jeopardize our friendship. I recognize that therapy would be more beneficial than seeking advice on a forum, but unfortunately, I cannot afford that at this time. Story 4. After nearly 11 years of love and sacrifices, I told my husband I wanted a divorce. I can do better, he promises, but empty words echo in my heart. Now we're stuck living together, tears mixing with longing as I fight the urge to hold him close again. Will I find the strength to let go? Summary. I recently asked my husband, whom I have been married to for nearly 4 years and have been together with for almost 11, for a divorce on Sunday. However, I find myself desiring to hug him, hold him, and express my love for him. I want to keep the background brief, but this is an almost 11-year relationship, so feel free to skip it if it is too lengthy. I apologize if my thoughts seem scattered. I am in a state of distress. My husband was not a bad person, but he displayed a great deal of immaturity and inconsideration for many years. He has struggled with depression and other issues that he needed to address. He fell into a depression after losing his position as an athlete. Due to a problem with the system, he was removed from the team after being selected to compete in some relatively important competitions. He also experienced humiliation when he was asked to return all his team gear and repay the scholarship, which he could not afford at that time. The university later recognized and corrected this mistake, but by then, it was too late for him to compete. Following this, he sank into a depression and bitterness that persisted for over a decade. For many years, he was unhappy about what he lacked but never took any steps to improve his life. He dropped out of university and worked part-time inconsistently. I met him after the team incident. At that time, I could perceive the pain he felt due to his circumstances, and I felt immense sympathy for him. He had dedicated his life since childhood to becoming an athlete, and the greatest opportunity he had was unjustly taken away. Consequently, I assumed the entire financial, mental, and emotional burden of our relationship. I worked full-time and made countless sacrifices. I refrained from buying anything I liked or wanted, only acquiring what was essential. However, I did purchase gifts for him occasionally to lift his spirits. I did everything I could to save money in hopes of eventually buying a house while trying to provide enough to keep him content. Meanwhile, whenever he found a part-time job, he spent all his earnings on eating out. I recognized that this was his way of comforting himself, but it became problematic. I addressed his spending habits as gently as I could, though there were times when I did become upset. Additionally, I bore the weight of all his emotional baggage. He was perpetually sad and miserable, always lamenting about what could have been, comparing himself to others, and never expressing gratitude for what I provided. He also required constant praise and reassurance for daily tasks he should perform. If he cooked, he expected me to compliment him repeatedly. If he did a load of laundry, he would remind me several times until I expressed my gratitude, even though he never thanked me for doing that or for any other necessary tasks. I consistently prioritized his emotions and happiness, attempting to help him heal and find peace and joy. However, he remained miserable for years, which caused me to feel immense misery and depression. After years of this, he eventually sought therapy, but recently during an argument, he admitted that he had not been taking it seriously. Now he cannot afford therapy and also lacks health insurance. He has also been extremely inconsiderate of me. This applies to all aspects of our lives, but here are some examples. 1. Even when I was working 2 jobs while he was unemployed, due to having a mental breakdown after finally securing a full-time teaching position, he still did not assist around the house except for cooking. 2. He never plans or organizes anything. I must handle all tasks that require organization. Even when I leave 90% of things prepared, he will still call and ask me to verify things for him. This situation has improved slightly recently. 3. He has never organized a date for us. I am the one who makes plans and takes him out, but whenever he decides to do something, I am always the one who must choose and research options. 4. When our baby was born, he did help significantly more around the house, but he never woke up when she did. For months, I was the only one tending to her. I requested more assistance, and he did nothing until a few months ago when I broke down because I was utterly exhausted and drained. 5. He has never taken pictures of our baby and me and has done things with her that he knew I wanted to experience with her, such as lighting the Christmas tree for the first time without including me. I have consistently raised these issues with him, clearly articulating how I felt and what I needed from him. I do not believe in the you should know what's wrong approach. I communicate directly. This brings us to another significant situation in our relationship. Every time we discuss or argue matters, he either remains completely silent, fails to acknowledge anything I have said and pretends the conversation never occurred, or he shifts the focus back to himself. He expresses fear about messing things up and losing me. It is always about how he feels. Subsequently, he often behaves as if the conversation never took place. There are several other issues we have encountered that also have a significant impact, but detailing them would make this too lengthy. We have had multiple discussions and arguments regarding his lack of action and his attitude toward our relationship over the years. I have consistently been direct and clear about how I feel, how he affects my emotions, and my need for him to take an active role in our relationship. We briefly tried couples counseling since it is quite expensive, and he did acknowledge to some extent that he has often prioritized his own needs over ours. Despite everything, I still love him, but I have not been in love with him for years. I have experienced long periods where all I wanted was to leave him, during which I felt resentment and at times even hatred toward him. I have felt so lonely and miserable. I have questioned my worth, wondering how after all my sacrifices he can still be unhappy and not strive harder for our relationship. I remained in hopes that he would improve. I even chose to have a child with him who is now 1 year old. I understand that this was an ill-advised decision given the previously mentioned challenges. Nevertheless, I have no regrets about having my baby. I have arrived at a point where I only possess the kind of love one has for someone with whom they have shared significant life experiences, someone I have revealed everything to. It might sound strange, but he has often been my closest friend. However, I do not perceive him as my husband anymore. At times, I do not even see him as a man. Now to my dilemma, on Saturday I informed him that I wanted a divorce. Nothing specific prompted this decision, there was no argument or major incident. I have considered leaving him for years but continued to stay. I am simply unable to continue. We cried, embraced, and argued. He believes he can improve, but I am exhausted by his empty promises of change. Due to his circumstances, we cannot separate immediately. His income covers half of the mortgage for our house. The property is in my name since I alone paid for the deposit and all closing costs. I pay for the other half of the mortgage plus all additional expenses ranging from food to utilities. We live paycheck to paycheck, so losing his financial support would be very challenging. He cannot afford to rent a place on his current salary, let alone contribute to the mortgage while simultaneously paying for rent. Therefore, we will be cohabitating for the foreseeable future. Yesterday, neither of us went to work. All day, I longed to hold him and have him hold me. Although I never withdrew intimacy or physical affection, I did not genuinely enjoy it and often felt irritation toward it. Now I simply want to be close to him. I frequently feel the urge to call him my love and to kiss and hug him. I own the house, and given the current housing market, I cannot sell it for a lower price since mine is aging and worn. Additionally, rents are triple the cost of the mortgage. My mother lives too far from my job for me to move in with her. My husband shares my car since his vehicle broke down, and his family is even further away than mine. However, he is studying and in his final year, so he needs to remain close to his university. If he moved in with his family, he would lose any income from his job due to travel expenses to the university. Furthermore, his entire paycheck wouldn't cover rent, let alone help with the house costs. Therefore, we will be living together for an extended period. He is expected to graduate in December and has been seeking a higher-paying job for a while. How can I prevent myself from retracting my decision to divorce him? Despite his numerous shortcomings, he has been a dear friend to me. We could talk for hours, laugh, and create stories together for extended periods. He accepted my spirituality without issue, accommodated my challenges stemming from diagnosed but untreated ADHD, and has been my closest companion for so long. I am aware that I deserve better and that I desire a better life. I recognize that this is a cycle that will not improve, yet it is tearing me apart. I will see him every day and we will have to coexist until he either finds a significantly better paying job. We share one car since his broke down and he obviously cannot afford a new one. If anyone has advice on how to help me remain committed to my decision to divorce him, I genuinely need it. Now that he has left the house, I cannot stop crying. I keep wanting to call him and tell him that I love him. Story 5. F26 on the edge. Am I being overbearing for wanting my husband M27 to come home after 4 hours, not 8 at a friend's? I'm drowning in chores and a baby while he's off golfing and smoking. I fantasize about winning the lottery and leaving him, I the bad guy. My husband and I have been together for nearly 4 years this year. We got married last June and we have a 7-month-old daughter. I feel like things have taken a turn for the worse. We attended a few therapy sessions before he was laid off 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was somewhat helpful initially, but now things have reverted to how they were before we started therapy. I may have enabled him prior to having our daughter and getting married by always cleaning up after him because I had the energy and did not really care about him going out. Now that we have a daughter, I am less patient, and I expect him to take responsibility for cleaning up after himself. I have new expectations regarding his outings and how long he is gone. I'm a stay-at-home mother now and I handle most of the cleaning. We share the responsibility of cooking dinner, but I do expect him not to come behind me and make a mess, only to expect me to clean it up again. It feels like I am cleaning in a frustrating loop. I have discussed this with him multiple times. He also has a habit of going out and not being where he says he will be before he leaves the house. For instance, he will say he is going to pick up a phone case from the mall. 4 hours later, I notice he has been gone longer than he mentioned, so I check his location and he is at a friend's house. When I ask what he is doing, he responds with something like, "They did not have the phone case I wanted, so I stopped by Jim's house. I will be on the way home soon," or "I just stopped by Jim's house on the way home, I am about to leave now." In both scenarios, I expect him to at least update me and let me know that he has gone somewhere else or that he will not be home at the originally stated time. Is that being overbearing or is that a reasonable expectation? Nevertheless, he consistently does this. He is always telling me he is going somewhere and then I check and he is at his friend's house or elsewhere rather than where he planned to be, while I am just at home with our daughter waiting for him to return. He does not consider whether I have anything planned once he is back. Sometimes I have to text him 3 or 4 times before he responds, and his excuse is that his phone is on silent or he did not see the messages. My expectation is that when he is not working, he should be home with us. Not all the time, but he should not be out late at night or spending entire days doing nothing multiple times a week. He returned at 1 a.m. last Sunday after being out with his fraternity for a probate. We are almost 30 years old. He told me he would not be home late, and when I checked his location around 11:30 p.m., he was at Applebee's. I did not even say anything because I am just tired of it. Today, my best friend gave birth to my goddaughter. He thought it would be a great idea to leave me with the baby and go to the driving range. I agreed that it was acceptable because 2 hours is not a significant amount of time. That was our agreement. When that location ended up being closed, he called his friend and they started a game of golf. Remember, it takes them 8 hours to play 18 holes. I called him after 2 hours because I had told him before he left that I wanted to go to the hospital, and when I heard him speaking, I could tell they were having a good time. I became upset and hung up the phone. He told me he had expected me to call him and tell him to come home once I wanted to go to the hospital. That was never the plan or communicated to me. He said he was going to the driving range, and when the plans changed, he failed to communicate that. When I expressed my frustration, I told him I would go to the hospital tomorrow and that I was upset with him and we needed to talk. Instead of coming home immediately to address my anger and discuss what was going on, he stayed to play golf with his friend for another hour and a half to 2 hours. If you read my previous posts about him, this behavior is not new. I am doing considerably better mentally than I was when I wrote those posts, so I am not furious, rather I am just emotionally exhausted with him. It feels like I am beating a dead horse. My mother took care of our daughter all last week. Did we go on a date? No. Did I go golfing with him to show I can be interested in what he enjoys? Yes. Did he invite his friend Jim when it was supposed to be just the two of us? Yes, I suspect they may be involved romantically at this point. There is no way a man can spend that much time with another man without being intimate. Regardless, we did nothing intimate. We went out with his friends on Saturday. He spent most of the week golfing and hanging out with friends. Some of that time was spent with me, but we were either watching television separately or watching a few episodes of a show together. I just feel like he is not attending to our relationship. He claims he does not want a divorce, but I feel he enjoys the idea of being a husband and a father without genuinely wanting to fulfill those roles. Is he a bad father? No, he loves his daughter. However, he is treading the fine line of being a mediocre husband. I am also tired of him smoking marijuana. It has become increasingly irritating and is a significant reason he spends so much time at Jim's house because they smoke together. Alternatively, he will go out to his car for an hour just to smoke and place bets, claiming he needs to concentrate. Meanwhile, I am inside feeding the baby and doing bath time while he is outside at around 8 p.m. in his car smoking a blunt and placing bets. If I mention it, I am the bad guy for interfering with his personal time. Then he returns smelling like marijuana and with bad breath and wants to kiss me and our baby. Can you please go brush your teeth and take a shower first? The other day, I asked him to go just 5 minutes up the street to the store to grab something, and it took him almost 2 hours. I suspect he was on his phone, talking, placing bets, or scrolling on social media before he left. Or he may have been smoking, but that is so ridiculous. I also have to remind him to brush his teeth. A grown man. He could go days without doing it and then be right in my face, and I have to say, "Oh my God, can you please go brush your teeth? Your breath smells awful." Then he kisses our daughter and blows in her face with rancid breath. That may seem trivial, but it gives me the ick. He also eats very loudly, smacking his lips, sucking on his fingers, burping loudly, licking his plate clean, and choking from eating too quickly. In the morning, he is loud when he coughs up mucus and spits aggressively. Again, that gives me the ick. I believe the bigger issues are becoming so unbearable that everything he does irritates me. Yes, he does kind and thoughtful things. He is not always unpleasant, just sometimes, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to see the positive qualities. I genuinely think that if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would take our daughter and leave him. I have been attempting to give him some grace since he was laid off 2 weeks ago, but even that was due to his own actions, so I struggle to be forgiving. This behavior was evident before he lost his job, so it is not new. I am simply tired of feeling like I am second to his friends. I am exhausted from him not considering me and our daughter when he is away. I am frustrated with his procrastination regarding his responsibilities. I have made a promise to myself that if he does not have a job by the end of these 3 months, I will leave. I am just worn out by things that should be common sense. Our therapist has told us that it is not fair to label things as common sense because everyone has different upbringing experiences, but some of his actions are so thoughtless and inconsiderate. I informed him that we would talk tonight, yet instead I am writing this. I am beginning to think that talking will not change anything anymore.